The longest war the U.S. has ever fought, 16 years and counting, is about to get longer as President Donald Trump decides on sending several thousand more troops to Afghanistan. As with the wars in the Middle East, Afghanistan highlights the difficult political choices and counter-insurgency strategies the U.S. has been pursuing fruitlessly since 9/11. Today's 6 Muslim countries Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Libya, Somalia and Afghanistan are in a state of meltdown, partly as a result of U.S. policies. The war on terror launched by President George Bush, the U.S. invasions of Afghanistan and Iraq, and the conflicting policies of carrying out regime change in the midst of an ever-expanding Islamist extremist opposition have all created greater dilemmas for the U.S. Since 9/11 there have been many good books and documentary films made about these dilemmas, yet in all this time Hollywood has been unable to produce the movie that informs or educates the average moviegoer as to the bigger picture on why failure persists and jihadism spreads. The few Hollywood films made about America's wars tend to be either satires or action movies in the John Wayne mold, showing U.S. troops as heroic and caring but professional killers. An exception was the 2008 film Hurt Locker, which won 6 Oscars and depicted the dilemmas faced by a U.S. explosive ordnance disposal unit in Iraq. But even Hurt Locker dealt with only a slice of the problem, as did otherwise well-made documentaries about U.S. forces in Afghanistan, such as Restrepo and Korangal. Hollywood movies do not ask the difficult strategic question: should the U.S. invade or interfere in countries it knows little about? How do U.S. troops win over local support? Is nation-building and promotion of democracy feasible by one part of the U.S. government while another part pursues a war strategy? Can the U.S. ever understand tribal societies through the barrel of a gun? Hollywood has left us devoid of any understanding of the escalating global chaos that is until now a remarkable new film, War Machine, starring Brad Pitt, which at first whiff sounds like a Gonzo-type war movie, brilliantly portrays these themes outlined above. David Macode, the Australian writer and director, and Netflix have made a movie that is both dark and satirical, emotional and belly laugh funny, as well as being educative about U.S. interventions. The script is based on the Rolling Stone magazine article and subsequent book The Operators, The Wild and Terrifying Inside Story of America's War in Afghanistan, by the late journalist Michael Hastings. His article led to the 2010 sacking of Stanley Muristol, the U.S. general in charge of the war in Afghanistan, after he and his staff officers made disparaging remarks about President Barack Obama to the journalist. The movie tells the story leading up to Muristol's dismissal. The casting of Pitt as Glenn McMahon, the imagined Muristol who is beloved by his men but also full of comic eccentrics, is near perfect. Pitt plays his role partly as absurdist comedy but also as someone who is on a steep learning curve on how to win or lose modern wars. Full of bluster and self-confidence, Glenn McMahon arrives to take charge in Kabul after another general had failed. "Let's go win this thing, and let's knock this on the head," he tells his military aides, the coterie of equally brilliant actors whose cameos act as foils for Glenn McMahon's slow realization that he is only repeating what other generals before him have tried and failed to do. Glenn McMahon cannot get the additional U.S. troops he needs because Mr. Obama is reluctant to send any. Glenn McMahon cannot stop Afghan farmers from growing poppy because officials tell him alternative crops like cotton would be competing with U.S. farmers. Fellow NATO officers teach Glenn McMahon a new reality: you can't build a nation at gunpoint and you can't win the trust of a country by invading it. He is told the cynical President Hamid Karzai, superbly played by Ben Kingsley with all of Mr. Karzai's habitual tics. Here's out Glenn McMahon describing how he will mark out a new direction: "We will build Afghanistan into a free and prosperous nation," says Glenn McMahon. "Sounds a lot like the old direction," Mr. Karzai replies with the knowing smile. Several dark yet truthful encounters speed up Glenn McMahon's understanding. The troubled and angry U.S. Marine played by Lakeith Stanfield questions how his contradictory strategy can work. Trained to kill the Marines, is now told he must show courageous restraint. "I can't tell the difference between the people and the enemy," says the Marine. "They all look alike to me. We can't help them and kill them at the same time. I am confused," he states. Actress Tilda Swinton, playing the German politician, tells Glenn McMahon that you are spread all over the country and fighting 1,000 separate battles with local people who don't want you in their villages, and that is a war you will never win. The general is gobsmacked into silence. The film will not get a wide cinema release because it is showing on Netflix. However, this is a film that should particularly be shown at universities and colleges, and discussed amongst young and old. It helps us understand why counterinsurgency is failing, terrorism expanding, and why wars have destroyed so many countries. It helps explain why after 16 years Washington is still debating troop numbers.